have an entire section on dealing with a bigot. The ways to deal with a bigot, just in general, and I'm glad Justin brought this up because this is a topic that I've wanted to talk about for a little while, at least as like a dedicated video. How often do we cram facts down their throat? How often do we aggressively, you're racist, you're this, you're that, you're a transphobe, you're all these things? And those things may be true. They may be. But what works better in certain situations, especially if it's somebody you love? Is it better to prove your superior knowledge on the topic? Or is it better sometimes to kind of hold their hand and show them why they're wrong? Now, what's the best way to show them why they're wrong? Or show them how they're wrong? It's different for every situation, but the situation that was brought up here specifically was about how a person thinks that gay men are lesser men. The way you would handle that, or the way that I would handle it personally, is to ask what criteria somebody has for a man. And then ask them what criteria you fail. And if one of those criteria is has a girlfriend or has a wife, and you point out, well, what if somebody is just so much better independent? Or what if they're so rich that having a wife is dangerous? Like, there might be a chance of them taking their wealth, right? Let's step into the capitalist shoes for a second here, and we do that. What about then? And if they keep on coming up with exceptions and go, well, either an exception can be made for you because, well, you're not straight, or an exception can be made for you because they realize that their criteria was bullshit in the first place. But a lot of times, if you throw the ball into their court and ask them why, sometimes they'll find that their reasoning is not 100% thought out. Or they'll parrot something that you already know. If you know a lot about this topic, enough to slam their head, to dunk on them in a conversation, then you probably have enough to know where they got their information from. I'll give you an example that happened with me and my family. There is a member of my family who is conservative, but I don't think they really know why they're conservative. They don't know anything about economics. They've ran a business before, as far as like they were a manager, and they've been in work and in a position of relative privilege for an incredibly long time. When it comes to stuff like economics, when it comes to stuff like proletariat rights, when it comes to stuff like that, I've done a lot of reading. I can sit there and dunk on those topics. But if me and this person are having a conversation, sometimes it's better for me to go, well, why do you think that? What happened the last time we had a conversation about BLM specifically is he started stating things that I knew from Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson. I could pull the individual quotes in the conversation. The straight thing that I said during that was shut the Fox News up. But regardless, the point is, if you know enough to dunk on somebody, you probably also know where their points are coming from if you give them a chance to articulate them. And if you know the responses to those points, letting them get out those points first sometimes works a lot better than just cramming all the information down their throat. Because when you cram all the information down their throat, you are just another voice against the voice that they already listen to. And you guys have equal weight now. But if you respond directly to the points that come from that other voice, you might be able to actually gain ground. This is why I tend to do video responses instead of responding to ideas and like presenting the idea to you and then responding to it. Because when I present the idea to you and respond to it, there's a chance that I've strawmanned it. There's a chance that I've gotten something wrong. But if I do this as a video response, I've given that side the time to articulate their position in their video, and then I can respond to that point. Throw the ball in their court. If they're a bigot, throw the ball in their court and let them articulate to you why. A good way this was done to me with a friend ages ago. I made a racist joke. I think it was like seven years ago, something like that. I made a racist joke around him, and he pressed me and said, "Why is that funny?" And after about 2 or 3 minutes of blundering around, I realized that, well, it wasn't. I guess it really wasn't. I kind of had to already agree with some stereotypes that were incorrect in order to see why this joke might have been funny. I don't remember what the joke was at the time because it's been years. But he threw the ball in my court and said, okay, neat joke, but why did you find it funny? What about that joke stimulated your humor? And I ended up floundering. It's not going to happen all the time. Somebody might, if you ask somebody why they don't like black people, they might immediately start going, well, you see, they actually have less IQ than white people. But I'm not a white supremacist because, well, the Asians, they got bigger IQs than us. It has something to do with their skull shapes or something like that. That's what I read anyway from my favorite YouTuber, ex-YouTuber, Stephen Molyneux. Now, if you are engaged in that conversation readily, you probably have already been able to identify the things that have been said there. There's been a reference to the bell curve, because that's where the claims on IQ and race stem from. There's been a conversation about phrenology, which was the study of skull shapes as it relates to ethnic groups. And, of course, a name drop of a particular person, which might not always happen, but in this example there was. So you've got three things. But if you have read the bell curve, have watched Molyneux and watched takedowns of Molyneux, and understand the problems and the processes presented in phrenology, you've got a whole conversation there to change somebody's mind. You can point out how skull shape does not necessarily correlate to gray matter in the brain, which necessarily means that it does not correlate to somebody's ability to function properly, or however properly they think. You can point out the arbitrary usage of IQ and how IQ measures a very specific set of skills, but it does not measure actual intelligence, because there are different types of intelligence, emotional intelligence, artistic intelligence, that are not necessarily measured very well by an IQ test. An IQ test checks in for a very specific set of things and then gets used as a measuring device after the fact. You can then point out that, well, hold on, if somebody's grown up in an underdeveloped country with an underdeveloped education system, then even if we accepted the IQ test to be 100% accurate, it would necessarily mean that these people, not by virtue of their genetics, but by virtue of their environment, would not pass this as well. Just like I wouldn't expect somebody to pass an aerospace engineering test if they're an artist. Pointing out that no matter where on the line you stop, the bell curve argument is not going to give you an actual accurate representation of somebody's intelligence in any way, shape, or form. And then, of course, it's easy to dunk on Molly. You can go about that route, but you only knew what angles of attack to go through because you let them tell you. Now, this does not work in all cases. This is not me arguing that YouTube should allow every bigot on the platform to spout their stuff so that we can then respond to it. This is about letting an individual outside of a platforming scenario have the opportunity to explain to you why they have the views that they do, and so that you can then educate them, correct them. And even if you fail at it, there's a thing called the fallacy of change, and is where you put the worth of the truth value of a statement that you have held to based on its ability to convince someone else, or your ability to convince someone else with it. Don't fall for this particular fallacy and start thinking that, well, I can't do this because I can't convince this person. That method might not work for them. It might work for somebody else. If you can get at least one or two people to break out of racist ideology, to break out of misogynistic ideology, to break out of homophobic ideology, you've made a positive impact on the world. Like, flat out, you've done it. You've done your deed for society. If everybody did that to one or two people, then we wouldn't have very many racists or misogynists left. So when you're dealing with a bigot, if you have the opportunity, and it is safe for you to do so, throw the ball in their court, get them to explain their point. And if you can't respond to something because you don't have a lot of knowledge on a topic, be honest about that. Go, hey, I'll look into that and we'll revisit this conversation later. Because likely, if they're taking their opinion from YouTube or Facebook or a meme or something else, you can probably debunk it. Especially if you're using correct primary sourcing methods. So do so. How to deal with a bigot. Sometimes without dunking. Woo. Subscribe, like, Patreon, all that other fun stuff. Do it, please. That'd be very helpful. I like pizza.